in the 06010.
Hello and welcome into Fantasy Focus alongside the incomparable Field Yates. My name is Daniel Dopp, bringing you an off-season podcast in which we're going to dive into the rookies. That's right. Obviously, with Field being here, we're going to go all in on the rookies that are going to have impacts here in fantasy football. A very fun show planned for you. But first and foremost, Field, it's great to see your beautiful face. How you doing, my friend?
I'm doing great, Daniel. Good to catch up with you. It's a beautiful time of the year. Fantasy football is just around the corner, so I'm pumped to discuss some of the rookies that you need to know about going into the 2025 season.
100%. I would be remiss if I didn't say I love that the hair is sticking around past first draft. I hope this continues into the football season. My question is, what comes next? Okay, so now we got the hair. Are you going to become a mustachioed man next? Like, are you bringing a mustache? Is that what Chapin wants? More of like some scruff with the beard?
Yeah. One fundamental issue there, Daniel, is that I am biologically capable of growing long hair, which I don't know if this is long, medium, getting there towards long, but it's definitely longer than I normally keep it. I can't grow a mustache. Like, I haven't shaved in a while, and you have zero idea. So while I may be kind of coming for your corner on Long Hair Island right now,
sure,
I will allow you to keep the beard and the mustache to yourself, because I could grow a mustache and beard until the end of my time on this earth, which I hope was a long, long time from right now, and it would not look anywhere close to where you are right now.
You're still going to look like that 6-year-old that's a pirate that has his mom's mascara on his face in order to fill in the beard and the mustache. Okay, love it.
Yeah,
love it.
Yeah.
All right, well, listen, we got a big show planned for you today. Field, I got a bunch of rookies I'm going to ask you questions about. I know you've already answered a bunch of questions on these guys, talking about it with Mel and Greeny on First Draft, but now from a fantasy perspective, we want to take a little bit of a deeper dive. So I want to start with the rookies that we think will make the biggest impact this season, and I feel like there is one rookie that is above all rookies in this regard.
Yeah, it's Ashton Jeanty, Daniel. And think back to where we were last year with the rookie running back class. And we were kind of hoping we'd find a guy that might emerge. Maybe Jonathan Brooks in the second half of the season would take on some value for Carolina. It turned out there was no crown jewel. This year there is a crown jewel. It's Ashton Jeanty. He goes 6th overall to the Raiders. So just going 6th overall at running back is notable in today's NFL. It speaks to the caliber of player that he is. He was in the same territory as Barry Sanders in terms of final season yardage. He's a true 3-down running back. I know everybody who watched college football last year is aware of the gaudy statistics, Daniel, but 2 seasons ago, when Boise State wasn't quite as good as they were this past season, they actually threw the ball to Ashton Jeanty a lot. He led all FBS running backs in receiving yards back in 2023 with 567. So he's a great runner. He's an elite receiver. He goes 6th overall to an offense that, even if you have some questions about the offensive line, should be much better, because the quarterback upgrade will totally change the way the defenses can attack the Raiders this year. And finally, perhaps most notably to some, he plays now for Pete Carroll. And we know that Pete Carroll loves to run the football. So Ashton Jeanty, I'm seeing him right now, Daniel, go middle of the first round. You and I have been taking part in this mock draft project. It feels as though the range for Ashton Jeanty, Daniel, is around pick 5. Maybe you get him by like pick 8 or 9, but it's going to be a pretty narrow range if our mock draft project is any indication.
Yeah, definitely feels like he's a middle of the first round kind of a running back. You probably won't be able to get him at the back half of the first round. You might be able to if your league is, excuse me, specifically wide receiver heavy. But I definitely agree with you that he's definitely worked his way into that first round. And you mentioned Pete Carroll. I've said this stat to you before. From 2012 to 2019, Pete Carroll had 6 of his 8 seasons as a coach for the Seattle Seahawks. 6 of 8 seasons where the team was top 3, at least top 3 in rush attempts and at least top 4 in rushing yards. Mind you, he did have Marshawn Lynch and Chris Carson. But when you look at those running backs, 6 of those 8 seasons, it feels like Ashton Jeanty landed in a really nice spot for his rookie season. Love to be able to see that.
Totally. Yep. And the Raiders had, I should make one more note. Going into the draft, they had arguably, maybe inarguably, the least impressive backfield. It was Raheem Mostert and then Sincere McCormick and Amir Abdullah. Like, there was nobody that you thought to yourself, that guy is capable of being a starter for the entirety of this season. So the stars have aligned for Ashton Jeanty to have a star rookie season.
Yep, excited to be able to see how that one works out. Another guy we're excited to be able to see, Omarion Hampton. Obviously, the
Yeah.
Chargers brought over Najee Harris on a one-year deal, but you don't draft a guy with the 22nd overall pick in the first round to let him sit on the bench field. What are your expectations for Omarion here in his rookie season?
He's really good as well. He was the only other running back that I had with a first round grade in the real draft this year. In fantasy drafts, I think it's going to be closer to the fourth round, third round, because let's talk about the good. It's very simple. He's 6 foot, 215 pounds, runs a 4.4, 4.40. He's very impactful. He can be very impactful in the passing game as well. He was great this past year when Drake May wasn't the North Carolina quarterback, which was a sign that even though teams were focusing almost exclusively on Hampton, he still got the job done. The Chargers, as we know, are a very good rushing team. We saw it with J.K. Dobbins mostly last year, but also Gus Edwards and others. There are a lot of really important things. This could be a big power scheme. Here are the mitigating factors. Really, the mitigating factor, Daniel, is that they signed Najee Harris, which this is not them signing Saquon Barkley like the Eagles last year, but it's a good player, right? A 1 year, $5 million base, up to $9.5 million for Najee Harris, who's been a starter for the past 4 seasons for Pittsburgh. This backfield might be sort of like Detroit, where both guys play a lot. But as we know, Jahmyr Gibbs without David Montgomery, if that was the world we lived in, is probably going 101 in fantasy drafts. Jahmyr Gibbs with David Montgomery is still incredibly valuable, but there are going to be some weeks where he gets 12 carries. So to me, that's the comparison, not in terms of play type, but in terms of potential fantasy usage for a guy like Omarion Hampton.
Yeah, especially when you have a coach in Jim Harbaugh that loves to run the football. You got two what would seem like workhorse type running backs that have good bodies to be able to take that kind of pounding. So just real quickly, is Omarion Hampton the kind of pass catcher that from a fantasy perspective I could expect to get a couple of catches a game from, or is he more of a just like a between the tackles kind of a runner?
I think he's good enough. I mean, I think he's good enough as a pass catcher. He actually kind of reminds me of Najee Harris, who people will recall maybe that back as a rookie, he was incredible. He led all running backs in catches as a rookie, did Najee Harris. Maybe he was second behind CMC, but it was a lead. It's not like Alvin Kamara or Jahmyr Gibbs where you're lining him up in the slot and running some crazy routes with him, but it's dumping the football off, 3 or 4 times in a given game. So again, I think the thing is that Najee Harris may not be great, Daniel, but I think he's good enough that he's not going to fade entirely. Does that make sense? And there are other situations where like Chase Brown, he just outplayed every other back that Cincinnati had healthy and available, that they just couldn't do anything other than give the ball to Chase Brown. This is not apples to apples, but my point is that I think Najee's going to be a factor enough that if Omarion Hampton had gone to the Dallas Cowboys at number 12, or the Raiders hadn't taken Ashton Jeanty and instead took him at 37, which I think was their second round pick originally, we'd be saying, oh my gosh, like Omarion Hampton might be a top 12 running back. Not quite as optimistic now, but still a really good player who I would be stunned if he is not the second running back taken in most drafts amongst rookies.
Amongst rookies, yeah. Leans in a really nice offense. Hopefully we're going to see a lot of points scored by the Chargers this year with not only Ladd McConkey coming back for a second season. Excited to see that. All right, we got more running backs. Field, this draft was just full of running backs. TreyVeon Henderson goes to the New England Patriots. A little bit different than the one we just talked about, right? Because Ramondre Stevenson is there, same way that Najee Harris is there. But now you have this rookie that was drafted with a pretty high draft stock, second round for TreyVeon Henderson. You got Josh McDaniels back. Third time's a charm, maybe, for the offense here with Josh McDaniels being the OC. So trying to figure out when you look at not only Ramondre Stevenson and TreyVeon Henderson, how are you looking at the split here? And is it similar to the Chargers one or a little bit different than what we just talked about?
Yeah, in both of these cases, it might be that the first carry of the game in week 1, or maybe the first carry in a lot of games, goes to the player who's going to end up being drafted second in this backfield. So at least, again, most of the mocks that you and I are doing, it's Omarion Hampton well ahead of Najee Harris.
Oh, yeah.
But not at the territory of Ashton Jeanty, obviously. On top of that, I think that TreyVeon Henderson will end up scoring more fantasy points this year than Ramondre Stevenson. Stevenson is the nominal Patriot starter. ADP once again reflects that Henderson is going to go well ahead of Stevenson if current patterns hold. He's explosive. He is extremely explosive. I thought Ramondre Stevenson was just not that good last year. A lot of volume, but particularly inefficient. Henderson is lightning in a bottle, man. And last year, Henderson, during his final Ohio State season, had this thunder and lightning duo with Quinshon Judkins, who we'll talk about in just a little bit now for the Cleveland Browns. It was the best, most efficient season of Henderson's college career. He was really good prior to that, Daniel, but it was a model that this guy could be at his best when he's getting maybe 12 to 15 opportunities per game, as opposed to 20 opportunities per game. He's dealt with some small nicks and dings and bruises throughout his college career, or at least he did. So I think Henderson has a chance throughout the beginning of the season that even if he's not playing quite as many snaps or comparable number of snaps to Ramondre Stevenson, to just be a far more efficient player. But this also strikes me as like the potential Rachaad White, Bucky Irving for this year, where it's a bit of an equitable split. And maybe it never gets to the point where one guy has totally faded. But as we know, last year, Rachaad White show early, Bucky Irving's role grows and grows and grows. And then by the end of the year, it was like Bucky Irving's like a top 10 running back, and Rachaad White is like maybe RB 31 in our weekly rankings. So that wouldn't surprise me if this one flips, because factoring in how I thought, again, Stevenson was just blah last year. Bad offense, bad offensive line, etc., but did not strike a ton of confidence in me to think that Henderson can't make a real mark in this Patriots backfield.
Yeah, I mean, Patriots would love to be able to have a guy like Rachaad White. I was thinking about like Ezekiel Elliott and Tony Pollard, where he would kind of play more of the Tony Pollard, right? Like that speed role, totally. that secondary running back to be able to help the Patriots out there. So that would be a really interesting thing. I'm interested to see kind of where he's going to land this year. Right now in our mock drafts, and mind you, it's June 12th. ADP is going to change a lot over the offseason. But right now, TreyVeon Henderson coming off the board as running back 30. So low-end RB3, potential maybe to move up a little bit from there, given what we hear in the offseason. That's one of the things that I always love about training camps. I can't wait to hear what comes out from all of our intrepid NFL Nation reporters, and especially with this one. Mike Reese, I know, is going to be on top of it, letting us know how all the splits and training camp reps are working out. So excited to see what Henderson's going to be able to do here. All right, yes, we got one more running back. We got a couple more running backs. Okay. We're going to do one more for this segment, Field Yates. Okay. Kaleb Johnson. I mean, so here's the thing. Kaleb Johnson with the Pittsburgh Steelers. Here's the good. Najee's gone. We've been talking about him in LA, right? So there is no more Najee Harris there. He has a clear path to touches, even with Jaylen Warren being there, because Jaylen Warren and him are two different kinds of running backs. So you know that his touches make sense. And he's in an offense in which Arthur Smith is the offensive coordinator, which I'm not sure there's a better thing for you to hear if you are a running back in the NFL. So when you look at Kaleb Johnson, he came off the board a little bit later, right, than some of these other running backs. I think he was a third rounder. How are you approaching Kaleb Johnson in fantasy?
Yeah, 67th overall out of Iowa. He was, I think, the 5th or 6th running back taken overall. He did not run well at the combine. He ran a 4.57, 4.58 did Johnson, which if you watched him on tape, that was about what you'd expect. He was never going to blow you away with the speed, but he got a ton of work in that Iowa offense, and he was really good as a pass catcher as well. Those who are watching right now on YouTube are seeing this ridiculous run after catch in a game against Nebraska where he should have been tackled for like a 7-yard gain. It was like an 80-yard touchdown. So Johnson's definitely got a well-rounded skill set. And he definitely strikes me as the likely starter for Pittsburgh, because the Steelers have shown like they don't really want Jaylen Warren to be a 20 touch per game kind of guy. There were stretches where he was playing more than Najee, and he was clearly better than Najee Harris. And yet it felt like the following week, it would just go right back to Najee Harris. And so I think there's probably a size reflection for Jaylen Warren, not a big guy, which is part of the reason why he was originally an undrafted free agent. You mentioned Arthur Smith, and there is a part of me that thinks about two dynamics. One, he had Bijan Robinson and frustratingly did not use him nearly as much as he should. Two, they did sign Aaron Rodgers, and Arthur Smith said, and I don't know what to make of Arthur Smith's press conference quotes anymore. Something to the effect of, hey, when you sign Aaron Rodgers and you trade for and pay DK Metcalf all this money, you're not going to run the wishbone. That being said, Daniel, last year, I think the Steelers probably felt like they had a relatively close answer to what Aaron Rodgers is and what DK Metcalf is in Russell Wilson and George Pickens, and they were still this super run-heavy attack. So we'll see whether they open things up a little bit this year and start to move more towards a pass-heavier system. System is good, though. I think Johnson holds off Jaylen Warren as the starting running back, and I think that he is going to be like a solid flex option, because I think Warren will play enough that it's going to feel like where Najee Harris was for a lot of last year, which was enough volume to probably be in lineups, but not enough upside that you were clamoring to start him.
Man, I got a lot of feelings about the Steelers signing Aaron Rodgers, but we're talking about rookies here, not old men on this podcast, Field Yates. We're going to save that for
He's the
another day.
anti-rookie.
He is the anti-rookie right now. Interested to see how Kaleb Johnson is going to work out. I wondered last year if we were going to see Jaylen Warren in that kind of like Chase Brown role, like you had mentioned, when you had a couple of really nice weeks for him, but it just doesn't feel like Pittsburgh views him as that kind of a running back. So that kind of gives me all the knowledge that I need there in that situation and sussing that one out. So let's move ahead. We'll talk about a couple of wide receivers here real quick before we take a break. Tet McMillan, Field Yates.
Yeah.
The one positive that I love about this last year, obviously, we saw Bryce Young really take a step. The second half of the season feels like Dave Canales is in a spot to take advantage of the movement that his third year quarterback has made. How do you feel about Tet McMillan in this Panthers offense?
Yeah, so let's start with some of the credentials. 8th overall pick, only player in the FBS with back-to-back 1,300-plus yard receiving seasons. That being said, he became a divisive player in the pre-draft process for people that weren't the Carolina Panthers, right? Because he ran this 4.55-ish 40, Daniel, not the guy that's going to blow you away with his speed. And the NFL historically has told us that kind of speed, that kind of average speed is not going to get you drafted in the top 10. He goes top 10. He goes 8th overall. Again, that's a testament, right? Same way that Ashton Jeanty going 6th matters to me. So does T-Mac going 8th. Bryce Young is a capable quarterback. I think people get very sensitive when you say good, bad, great, etc. Like Bryce Young's capable. He showed that down the stretch last year. Not just capable to help you, really improve from the start to the end of the season, but also keep fantasy football wide receivers afloat. So I do like the pairing here. The mitigating factors are as follows. I just don't know where he, meaning Tet McMillan, will stack up in the pecking order right now. I think there are 3 guys who probably feel internally like they have a chance to lead the Panthers in targets, right? Adam Thielen probably does, Xavier Legette probably does, and Tet McMillan probably does. Legette was the first-round pick last year. It was 32nd versus 8th, but still, he's a guy that had a couple of moments last year and probably feels like he's primed for a year 2 breakout. Adam Thielen is just Mr. Reliable. The Panthers actually reinvested in him this offseason. So T-Mac will end up being drafted, I think, like around wide receiver 30 and the highest of either of any of those Panthers wide receivers. I think that's correct. I think the upside is definitely the greatest. 8th overall pick with great size and red zone ability. But do I know coming out of the gates that he's going to have a role that's sticky in fantasy football from the jump? I don't know that because there are enough players to involve in this offense that give you just a touch of concern relative to, again, this is last year, not this year. I mean, last year, and it didn't always bear out this way, but like Marvin Harrison Jr. and Malik Neighbors had incredibly clear paths right out of the gates, right? Mm-hmm. Neighbors' path proved to be real. Marv's path proved to be fake for some reason that the Cardinals still haven't answered for. It's not the same level of clear in Carolina for T-Mac.
Yeah, I do feel like we're lined up for at least 2 games from Adam Thielen where he tops 20 fantasy points and games where I wish it would have gone to Tet McMillan instead or Xavier Legette. But with that old man still there, it is interesting to kind of figure out when you look at this wide receiving core because Xavier Legette, I feel like he's kind of, I don't want to say he's like the lost man in this offense, but like the idea that he was a first-round pick, I don't think that he carries a first-round pedigree in people's heads when they're drafting him in fantasy. So
yeah, and like last year was just okay, right? And like it was fine, but it wasn't terrible. It wasn't like write-off bad, right? Like there were some rookies last year where you're like, is this guy like Jalen Polk for the Patriots? Like there's questions about whether he makes the team this year, right? He was the 37th or 38th overall pick a year ago. That's not the territory for Xavier Legette, but it wasn't enough that in all of our mock drafts, and we're probably 28 deep by now, close to it, like Legette's on the board in the 16th round frequently when I'm sitting there with my last pick.
Yep. By the way, just shout out to Kyle Williams. Hopefully he can break the cycle for bad Patriots wide receivers coming out of the draft, right? Fingers crossed. All right, we got another wide receiver we're going to talk about here really quickly, Field Yates, and it's Travis Hunter. I got no idea. So many questions surround this situation, right? We have no idea how much offense he plays, how much defense he's going to play. I do know this. This is the positive for me. Liam Cohen coming over from Tampa. You love to be able to add what he was able to do with that Tampa Bay offense. When you look at it, Tampa was top 5 in points scored. They were top 5 in passing and rushing yards per game. It seems like the offense could get even better here. And there's not a lot of target competition outside of Brian Thomas. Everyone else that was in that offense seems like they left. Gabe Davis, gone. Christian Kirk, gone. Evan Ingram, gone. Frees up about 150 targets. So knowing that there is so much uncertainty with this, Field Yates, and there is no good answer here, How are you tentatively trying to approach this rookie?
Yeah, I'm landing in the middle of two sort of forces that are pulling you in different directions. All right, number one force. This guy's incredible. I thought he was the best player in the draft. Clearly, I thought that if he is just a wide receiver, he was the best player in the draft last year. It wasn't just because he could play both ways, right? The Jaguars traded away a first-round pick next year. They went from 5 to 2 for a non-quarterback. A lot of signs suggest they believe this guy's going to be special, special, special. I believe, based off the tape, he's going to be special, 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 right? Here's the other forces pulling you the other way. He might play 60% of the snaps on offense, and that's fine, right? Because he's going to be busy playing defense as well. And you and I were having a conversation over lunch maybe 2 weeks ago, and we were talking about this idea. Like, what if he plays 60% of the snaps on both sides? That's a ton of snaps, Daniel. But look at guys last year. Maybe it was 65% that we drew as the line in the sand. And we filtered out, you filtered out specifically, the highest scoring players. And Xavier Worthy was the only one that was under that number, that percentage, 60 or 65. Again, forgive me for not 60, remembering right 60%. Offhand. 60. And he was the only one that had any sort of fantasy relevance. And Worthy also had very little fantasy relevance up until Rashee Rice, A, got hurt, and then B, the Chiefs kind of figured out how to utilize him. It was not the bombs away Worthy stuff. It was the, hey, we're going to throw you a wide receiver screen 5 times a game, and you might have 11 catches for 110 yards, right? So to me, if Hunter is playing only 60% of the snaps, I mean, you're talking about a player who's probably not usable in fantasy. So where did that land, Daniel? Somewhere in the middle. Like wide receiver, like 28 to 32. And he'll probably get drafted higher than that, Daniel, because of the excitement around the player. But Hunter's a tough one to grasp. They may, by the time we get to September, say, hey, he's a full-time wide receiver and we're going to worry about defense at a later phase. And if that's the case, he's a top 20 play. I mean, top, 2022, right? But maybe he's more defense than offense, and he's playing 40% of the snaps on offense, which again, it's a justifiable thing for them to do. You don't find 40% playtime wide receivers ever make a fantasy mark, unless you're Nick Westbrook-Akine and all you do is catch touchdowns.
That's it.
I think you kind of land in the middle, and you just sort of hope that it's maybe 70% of the snaps on offense, still a mark on defense, or for fantasy purposes, you get the upside play, which is, hey, he's just playing so well on offense that we're going to focus on that, and defense will be kind of third and long situations, red zone, goal line, and he plays 20% of the defensive snaps, and you have yourself a top 20 wide receiver.
Let me ask you this, though. You already mentioned we're doing our mock draft exercise. We've done at least 20 mock drafts together, you and I. Have you drafted Travis Hunter?
A little bit, yeah. I've made a point to draft him on 1 or 2 occasions, maybe more than that, but a few, yes. Not like I haven't gone, Travis Hunter targeting, but I also have not shied away from him because, again, if you told me that the Jaguars, and this is possible, like people that are saying, how don't you know the answer? My response would be, you think Liam Cohen knows right now? Like they're just going to say, Travis Hunter hasn't even put a pad on. Like they might get to August 15th and their head coach, who was the first person hired in this transition, who is an offensive guy, may go to the staff and say, congratulations, defensive coordinator. You got to figure it out on your own because this guy's playing offense. We just don't know. So we will ADP move throughout the course of the preseason. Rankings move throughout the course of the preseason. We will revisit this one over the next, let's call it 2.5 months.
Yep, I'm with you on that. If we start to get the sense that he's going to play 80 to 85% of the offensive snaps, I think you're going to see him start to rise up in our ranks closer to that wide receiver 20 spot that you mentioned, Field. If we find out he's only going to play 60% of the snaps because they tell us that in training camp, then it's going to be tough to figure out what weeks you play him because he's such a polarizing player. I think at that point, he would be this boom bust individual, right? Because he's not getting probably as much volume as you want if he's not on the field all the time. But he obviously has the ability with everything that you just saw in those highlights while you were talking to be able to take 4 catches for 160 yards and 2 touchdowns, right? So it's like there could be some of that boom bust nature to him. So, all right, we got more coming up on the other side. Don't go away. Field Yates continues to dive into the 2025 rookie class. We'll see you guys in just a moment. Back here on Fantasy Focus alongside Field Yates. My name is Daniel Dopp, diving into the 2025 rookie class. Field, We just went through the top impact rookies. Obviously, there's a bunch more rookies we're going to talk about, but the top impact rookies for fantasy football. I want to ask you, which rookie landed in the best fantasy spot? Like, if I'm just a fantasy manager and I'm thrilled with where a guy landed, who do you think is the best one?
Yeah, I'm going to go with Quinshon Judkins, Daniel. And if we didn't have this topic, I would have had Quinshon Judkins right in the same territory as Omarion Hampton as far as overall value. Judkins was the 34th pick, I believe, in the draft, top of the second round to the Browns. Maybe it was 36 because they picked Carson Swessinger with the 33rd selection. But he was the third running back taken, was Judkins, who I was talking about him earlier. He was the funder to TreyVeon Henderson's Lightning. Cleveland wants to have a two-man backfield that's built around their two rookies because they later took Dylan Sampson, who will be the Lightning. Yep. He led the SEC in rushing touchdowns to Dylan Sampson at Tennessee last year. Judkins is a baller, though. Very good speed, very good size, very good power, awesome on those gotta-have-it situations. The Browns have talked about how they want to get back to the scheme they were running when they were actually good a few years ago, right? A lot of this outside zone, feature the run. Makes sense, by the way, when you have a quarterback competition that is so wide open right now, and you have no idea who is going to actually be under center. Whoever they play in week one, the Bengals or something. So Judkins is in a great spot. He should be a very busy man. Dylan Sampson will definitely get work, but I think Judkins will lead. He's the second best bet to lead his team in carries amongst the rookies. Ashton Jeanty is, whatever. He is minus 10,000. I'm making that up, obviously, but he will lead the Raiders in carries if he's healthy. Judkins will lead the Browns in carries if he stays healthy as well.
Yeah, it wouldn't shock me now that you mentioned that if he had more carries than Omarion Hampton, just because of the people he's splitting time with. Hampton obviously having Najee Harris there, plenty good, right? And toting the ball. But
he's fine. He's fine, right?
But do you think Jerome Ford is going to work into this backfield as well, and it's going to kind of be like a three-person committee here?
I think Ford will be there and he'll hang. And if the rookies aren't picking up the playbook or making mental errors, he'll factor in. But Jerome Ford had to stay on a reduced salary to stick around with Cleveland. We've seen what it looks like. It's fine, but it's far from inspiring. So I think the Browns are sort of engaged and fired up by their two rookies in the backfield. They tapped into this very, very historically deep, I should say, running back class in the draft. And they got two players who I think complement each other really well.
Yeah. Feels like they definitely drafted the running backs of the future for that offense. No offense to Jerome Ford. So we'll see how that one works out. Let's talk about another rookie. Field, I thought he had an awesome landing spot. I was super pumped about this. In my best ball leagues, I've drafted a lot of RJ Harvey. Now he's got to split some time with J.K. Dobbins. So break this one down for me, because right now I'm not feeling great about all my RJ Harvey shares.
Yeah, the best landing spot is important here. Dobbins gets a 1-year deal. He obviously had to wait until, a third of the way through June to get there. He's had to be patient. Dobbins is good, right? J.K. Dobbins is a legitimately good player. He showed it last year with the Chargers, where he either came close to or broke over 1,000 rushing yards. He was good with the Ravens when he was healthy. It's all about the health for J.K. Dobbins. He got hurt during last season, but he came back late in the year. J.K. Dobbins is full stop a good running back. This is not this is not like the Broncos if they had signed Raheem Mostert, or if they had signed, if they had been the ones that signed Miles Sanders or something, right? A veteran that's you're he's there, but he's not going to threaten the running back. J.K. Dobbins is going to play a role. Now, our guy Jeff Legwold, who covers the Broncos, talked about Dobbins maybe being a factor in that third down back role. It's possible. Dobbins can catch the football, but I think he's got more than that in the bag, right? So Sean Payton cares not about your fantasy teams. And of course, you need somebody besides RJ Harvey. He was a smaller back. I've talked about this throughout the process. He's a small back that plays big. I love the player. Loved him. I had one of the highest grades on him, I think, in sort of the draft analyst community. Loved RJ Harvey. But they have now brought in a player in Dobbins that I think conservatively pushes for 150 carries this year, right? That's, a little under 10 a game. That's a conservative number for J.K. Dobbins. If, and this is a gigantic if, he stays healthy. It's a blow, Daniel. It definitely is a blow. So I think that RJ Harvey has moved closer to where we talked about TreyVeon Henderson, right? I think Harvey might start, but it also wouldn't stun me. We have a full training camp to go. J.K. Dobbins could definitely start. Right. But Harvey's secret sauce will be if they involve him in the passing game a lot. So even if they take off, let's call it 35 to 40% of the rushing attempts, but signing J.K. Dobbins allows them to tap into his passing game prowess a little bit more,
Sure.
it'll be fine. But we were talking about what, like a top 20 running back who's maybe closer to running back 30 now after this very, very impactful signing.
Yeah, and that's kind of the way that I was looking at it too. I mean, you look at the other rookie running backs we just talked about, and Omarion Hampton and Quinshon Judkins, their ADP is somewhere around that low-end RB2 spot, and that's where RJ Harvey was. And now it feels like, given this move, like you had said, he's going to definitely fall down closer probably to TreyVeon Henderson, a guy that's splitting more of the carries in that backfield and having the lion's share of that workload, unfortunately. Interesting to be able to see how these situations always work out, because last year we thought that Brock Bowers was in a really bad spot. Turns out he was maybe still not in the spot that we wanted, but he was able to overcome it. So we're going to hope that even for these rookies that have bad landing spots in fantasy, they can still prove that they can be useful for us on our fantasy squads. All right, when we come back, we got more from Field Yates. He's going to tell you one rookie that you need to not sleep on here in fantasy football in 2025. Stick around. We'll see you on the other side. Back here on Fantasy Focus, my name is Daniel Dopp alongside Field Yates, and we are diving into the 2025 rookie class. Field, we talked about the top impact rookies. We talked about the best and potentially maybe worst now landing spot within the fantasy running back situation. I want to know if there is a rookie that you're saying, hey, this is a sleeper. It's a tough word to use because we have so much information on so many guys now. But if there was one sleeper in the draft that you had that you really liked, who's that guy that you need to make sure that fantasy managers know more about?
I'm a fan of Jack Bech. He ended up going late in the second, I think 58th overall to the Raiders out of TCU. He was inside my top 50 players in my final draft rankings. 43rd or 44th overall was Bech, and he had this breakout season. But just a little bit of context on the player. Back as a true freshman, he went to LSU on a team that also had Brian Thomas Jr. and Malik Neighbors. You may have heard of them. Jack Bech actually led the team in receptions. He was a tight end at that point. He pivoted. He's now a wide receiver. He was awesome during the Senior Bowl week. You may recall he had this walk-off touchdown, which was his first football game he played in after he tragically lost his brother, who was killed on New Year's Eve in New Orleans during the incredibly tragic terrorist attack. And Jack Bech has incredible football character. He showed that throughout the pre-draft process. He can flat out ball Daniel. He reminds me a little bit of Puka Nacua, not to cast too much expectations on a kid, but the idea being just ultimate route runner, incredibly tough, catches everything, so good with the football in his hands after the catch, great quickness, just gets open, makes plays. The Raiders obviously have Brock Bowers. The offense runs through him in the passing game. It'll run through Ashton Jeanty in the running game. But it's Brock Bowers, to me, Jacoby Myers, still clearly and obviously entrenched as wide receiver 1. But Jack Bech can really slide into that wide receiver 2 role. And when you got a quarterback in Geno Smith who's legit, you have a chance to have 3 pass catchers make a mark in a given week. It did not feel like that was the case with Aiden O'Connell under center or some of the other nondescript starters this year. Like, I don't think the Saints, even if they had 3 great players, are going to have 3 fantasy viable pass catchers. There's just not good enough quarterback play to expect that in my eyes.
Yeah, I think that was the big part, right? Last year, like the reason why we were down on Brock Bowers going to Las Vegas wasn't because of Brock Bowers or potentially the landing spot. They had Aiden O'Connell and Gardner Minshew were their quarterbacks, right? Like it just didn't feel like a super promising situation. We've seen Geno be able to elevate these pass catchers, especially for us in fantasy, like brings everything that we need. So from that perspective, really excited to be able to see what's going to go on here. So hopefully with Jack Bech, we can get a nice sleeper a little bit later in drafts. Right now, Field, just to say this, he's probably coming off the board or he's ranked as wide receiver mid-50s. Is that fair? Just because how deep the wide receiver spot is?
He's drafted in rounds 14 through 16 in our mocks. He's the conventional late round bucket of flyers type player.
I love that. Love that. All right. When we come back, we got one more thing we're going to dive into with Field Yates, the worst landing spot from the 2025 rookie class for fantasy football. We'll see you guys in just a moment. Back here on Fantasy Focus alongside Field Yates, my name is Daniel Dopp, diving into the worst landing spot of all the rookies from the 2025 NFL draft for us in fantasy football. Field, I hate to say this, but I feel like I know exactly who this player is going to be, even before I looked at the show note, because all of the Jalen McMillan shares that I have in Dynasty Football got so frustrated when the Bucs drafted Emeka Egbuka. I do not understand what's going on here. They already have Mike Evans. They still got Chris Godwin. They've already got Jalen McMillan. I take that back. Obviously, we know the injury history with Chris Godwin. Mike Evans is getting older, but at least for this year, it feels like maybe not the best landing spot for the rookie who was a first rounder.
Yeah, the draft is not just about this year, especially for the really good teams that can afford to draft for value and not need. And the Bucs, who have an incredible draft track record, their GM Jason Light said after the draft, he was a top 10 player on our board. He was there at number 19. Yeah. So Mike Evans is year to year at this point. Chris Godwin coming off of a major ankle injury. We'll see exactly when he returns. It might be that Egbuka has a role early in the season, but if Chris Godwin is back to full form at some point in 2025, which I expect, it's hard to imagine that Emeka Egbuka is better than wide receiver 3, right? Those are two guys. Evans is a surefire Hall of Famer, and Godwin is, an all-pro or at least a Pro Bowl level player who's been really good for a long time. So it makes sense for 2026 and maybe 2027. But for right now, it's hard for me to get as enthusiastic about Emeka Egbuka as I would have been if he had gone 2 spots later when the Pittsburgh Steelers had number 21. And as of right now, it looks like their wide receiver 2 is Calvin Austin, who was definitely fine last year, maybe even better than fine. But I wouldn't say that Emeka Egbuka would have had to compete very much for that wide receiver 2 job in Pittsburgh, whereas I think there's a chance he's competing for the wide receiver 3 job at best at Tampa when Godwin and Evans are healthy. So not as bullish on him in Tampa as I would have been in a different spot just because of the crowded room for that crowded wide receiver room down there for the Bucs.
Yeah, not for 2025, but I do appreciate Uncle Jason looking forward to the future, obviously 2026, 2027, making sure we got good wide receivers lined up for Baker Mayfield in the future. So,
he's elite at the draft. So
he is.
2 years from now, we'll probably be talking about Emeka Egbuka with like 94 catches in a season.
Dude, just one of all of these I'm just always going to draft an Ohio State wide receiver. It just feels like that's a safe thing to do in the draft right now.
Totally. Yeah. They're a machine. They're a factory. And they've got more coming. Carnell Tate next year, Jeremiah Smith the year after that. So the Columbus, whatever it is they have in the water of the wide
whatever they have there. Yeah.
In Columbus, Ohio, it's working. So don't change it up.
Hopefully we can maybe get Marvin Harrison Jr. back in the building to have a little bit more of whatever that water is, and we can get him on tap for a year to break out. That's what we need.
Yes, please.
All right.
We do.
Field Yates, love you, brother. Thank you so much for doing this with me. Don't forget to love yourself. I appreciate you. We're going to have more podcasts coming up later on this offseason. I got one with Mike Clay where we're going to dive into all the projections, hardest rankings that we have. Going to have one with Liz Loza, talking facts and feelings. Going to dive into all the injury stuff with Stefania. So make sure you come back, check out the feed. We love you. Don't forget to love each other. Be kind to yourself and enjoy the rest of the offseason. See you guys.